August 24th, 79 AD. The sun rose slowly over the Bay of Naples, painting the water gold as it had done for centuries. Fishing boats drifted near the shore. Smoke rose gently from household kitchens. It was a morning so ordinary that no one could imagine it would be remembered forever. In Pompeii, the city awakened to familiar routines. Bakers lit their ovens before dawn, kneading dough by lamplight. Merchants rolled open wooden shutters and swept yesterday's dust from stone thresholds. The forum filled with voices as traders prepared for another profitable day. Children ran barefoot through streets worn smooth by generations of footsteps, their laughter echoing between brightly painted walls. In Herculaneum, just a few miles away, life moved at a slower pace. This was a town of privilege. Wealthy Romans woke in seaside villas, listening to waves brush gently against the shore. Servants prepared breakfast in marble kitchens. Curtains were drawn back to reveal courtyards and sea views. Conversations drifted lazily through shaded halls. Above both cities stood Mount Vesuvius, green, silent, familiar. Its slopes were covered in vineyards, orchards, and small farms. The soil was rich, dark, and generous. Wine from these lands was prized across the Roman Empire. To the people living below, the mountain was not a threat. It was a gift. It had not erupted in living memory. For nearly 800 years, Vesuvius had remained quiet. Entire generations had lived and died without seeing fire or smoke. Children grew old beneath its shadow. Empires rose and fell. The mountain never moved. No one alive believed it ever would. But that morning, nature was uneasy. Birdsong faded. Insects vanished. Dogs whimpered and refused to settle. The air felt heavy, dense, and strangely still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The mountain stood silent in a way that felt wrong, though no one could explain why. By the end of the day, Pompeii and Herculaneum would no longer exist. Not abandoned, not ruined, buried. Nearly 20,000 people would be frozen in their final moments, preserved beneath ash and stone for almost 2,000 years. Pompeii was a thriving Roman city of about 15,000 people, alive with commerce, ambition, and movement. Latin mixed freely with Greek and other languages from across the Mediterranean. Sailors, merchants, slaves, and citizens crowded its streets. The city had grown prosperous from trade, positioned perfectly along major routes connecting Rome to the eastern provinces. Ships arrived daily at the nearby port of Naples, bringing goods from Egypt, Greece, North Africa, and beyond. Spices, silk, olive oil, grain, wine, and slaves all passed through this region. Fortunes were made and lost in Pompeii's markets. The city was sophisticated beyond what history books once imagined. Aqueducts carried fresh water from distant hills through an intricate network of lead pipes and channels. Public fountains lined every major street, providing clean drinking water to all residents, regardless of wealth or status. Public baths offered hot, warm, and cold pools where politics, gossip, and business deals flowed as freely as water. These weren't just places to wash. They were social centers where Romans of all classes mingled, argued, made alliances, and conducted business. The bathhouses were decorated with elaborate mosaics depicting gods, heroes, and sea creatures. Steam filled marble rooms. Oil vendors sold their products at the entrance. Professional masseurs worked in side chambers. Some bathhouses even had libraries and exercise yards attached. Street food shops, known as thermopolia, served hot meals to laborers who lived in cramped apartments above workshops and businesses. These fast food counters had large ceramic jars built into stone counters, each filled with different foods kept warm over small fires. Lentil stew, chickpeas, fish, sausages, and bread were standard offerings. Workers would stop by in the morning for a quick breakfast or at midday for lunch. The wealthy rarely used these establishments, as they had private kitchens and slaves to cook for them, but for everyone else, thermopolia were essential. Archaeologists have found over 80 of these food shops in Pompeii alone, showing just how common they were. Taverns echoed with laughter and arguments late into the night. Wine flowed freely, sometimes mixed with water, as was the Roman custom, sometimes drunk straight for those seeking oblivion. Dice games were played, despite being technically illegal. Fights broke out. Friendships formed. Brothels advertised openly with painted signs and explicit frescoes showing exactly what services were available inside. Prices were often painted on the walls. Life in Pompeii was loud, crowded, and intensely human. The streets themselves told stories. Graffiti covered nearly every available surface. Some was political. Vote for Brutius Balbus for mayor, he'll fix the roads. Some was commercial. The fruit sellers support Volcanius for office. Some was personal. Marcus loves Spendusa. Cruel Lalagus, why do you not love me? Someone else had written, I don't want to sell my husband, not for all the gold in the world. A touching sentiment preserved for 2,000 years. Insults were common too. Epaphra is no good at ball games. Another person had simply written, I made bread. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of these small human moments written on walls, giving us a window into the minds of ordinary Romans that we have nowhere else. At the edge of the city stood an enormous amphitheater. Built around 70 BC, it was one of the oldest permanent stone amphitheaters in the Roman world, older even than the Colosseum in Rome. It could seat 20,000 people, more than lived in Pompeii itself. Gladiator games drew crowds from surrounding towns, filling the streets with excitement, rivalry, and violence. These weren't just entertainment, they were displays of sparse furnishings, but also evidence of medical care, suggesting that gladiators were valuable property worth maintaining. The morning of the games would feature animal hunts, where exotic beasts brought from across the empire were slaughtered. Bears, lions, leopards, bulls, wild boars. Hunters called venatores would fight them with spears and arrows, while the crowd cheered. At midday came the executions. Criminals would be killed in various creative and horrible ways, sometimes forced to reenact mythological deaths. A man might be burned alive while dressed as Hercules. Another might be torn apart by animals while playing the role of Orpheus. These weren't considered entertainment in the way the gladiator fights were. They were public demonstrations of justice and Roman power. The crowd would eat lunch and talk among themselves, paying only partial attention. Then, in the afternoon, came the main event, the gladiators. Different types of fighters with different equipment and fighting styles were matched against each other. The murmillo wore a heavy helmet and carried a short sword and large shield. The retiatores fought with a net and trident, wearing almost no armor, relying on speed and distance. The traex had a curved sword and small shield. The secutor was designed specifically to fight the retiatores, with a smooth, rounded helmet that the net couldn't catch. Fights could be quick or last for many exchanges. When one fighter was wounded or exhausted, he could surrender by raising a finger. The decision of life or death officially belonged to the sponsor of the games, but they usually followed the crowd's sentiment. Thumbs turned could mean death or mercy. Historians still debate which gesture meant what. If death was decided, the defeated gladiator was expected to accept it with dignity, kneeling and allowing his opponent to deliver a clean killing blow. The body would be dragged out with hooks. Sand would be raked over the blood. The next fight would begin. The houses of the wealthy were built for privacy from the street but openness within. From the outside, they have wealth and power by local politicians trying to win votes and prestige. The games could last all day. Exotic animals were slaughtered. Criminals were executed publicly. Gladiators fought to the death or until one surrendered and begged for mercy. The crowd would roar. Women threw flowers to their favorite fighters. Betting was constant. Blood soaked into the sand of the arena floor. In 62 AD, a riot broke out in this amphitheater between Pompeians and visitors from the neighboring city of Nuceria. The Roman historian Tacitus recorded the event. It started with insults, escalated to stone throwing, and ended with weapons drawn. Many died, many more were wounded. The incident was so serious that Rome itself intervened. The amphitheater was closed for 10 years as punishment. Pompeii was shamed across the empire. But by 79 AD, the ban had been lifted. The games had returned. Herculaneum was different, smaller, calmer, far wealthier. With a population of only about 4,000 to 5,000 people, Herculaneum was a resort town for Rome's elite, a place to escape the noise and heat of the capital during the brutal summer months. Villas rose in multiple stories, something rare for Roman buildings, each one more luxurious than the last. These weren't just homes, they were statements of power and taste. Marble floors imported from across the empire gleamed underfoot. Walls were painted with elaborate frescoes showing mythological scenes, garden landscapes, and architectural illusions that made small rooms appear vast. Private gardens featured fountains, sculptures, and carefully trimmed hedges. Some houses had their own small bathhouses. Libraries filled with scrolls reflected a love of philosophy and learning. One villa, later called the Villa of the Papyri, contained over 1,800 scrolls, the only intact library to survive from the ancient world. Most were works of Greek philosophy, especially Epicurean text. These carbonized scrolls were so fragile that early excavators destroyed many trying to unroll them. Modern technology, including advanced scanning techniques, is only now beginning to read these texts without physically opening them. They contain works by authors whose writings were thought completely lost. The library's owner was likely Lucius Alpernus Piso, Julius Caesar's father-in-law, a man of immense wealth and culture. Terraces overlooked the Bay of Naples. Sunlight reflected off polished stone. The view stretched for miles. On clear days, you could see the islands of Capri and Ischia floating on the horizon. Gentle sea breezes cooled even the hottest afternoons. This was a town built for comfort, beauty, and leisure. Philosophers walked through columned gardens discussing ethics and the nature of happiness. Musicians performed at evening banquets. Poets recited new verses. The educated elite of Rome gathered here to escape responsibility and indulge in intellectual pleasure. Both cities owed their prosperity to the land beneath them. Volcanic soil made crops flourish. Vineyards thrived on the slopes of Vesuvius, producing wine that was shipped across the Mediterranean. The volcanic minerals created a unique flavor profile that Romans prized. Olive groves stretched across the lower slopes. Grain grew abundantly. Fruit trees bore heavily. Shepherds grazed their flocks on the high pastures. The mountain gave life, wealth, and stability. Farmers who worked this land were prosperous by ancient standards. Their children were well fed. Their storerooms were full. What no one understood was that the mountain was not dormant. It was loading. Deep beneath the surface, magma had been rising slowly for centuries. Gas